We'll call the committee back to order. I guess there's Ms. Isley. Okay. Before questions from Ms. Sutton, let me just, Mr. Walden asked that we put this March 11, 2009 letter to Frank Twardy, Acting Commissioner concerning Salmonella outbreak by Mr. Barton, and Mr. Walden had signed it. Without objection, be made part of record. Next, turn to Ms. Sutton for questions, please. Ms. Sutton for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions, but I would like to begin, Mr. Keenan. I know that when you answered the question about supporting mandatory recall authority for the FDA, that you wanted to say something in addition to the fact that you all support that. So I'm going to give you this opportunity.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sutton. And you know, I have a special feeling for you because a lot of my employees live in your district, so you can imagine how much this has affected all of us. So thank you for that question. I do support a mandatory recall, but I wanted to express my at least concern or opinion that if there was a mandatory recall by the FDA, would it have prevented another manufacturer or owner of a company like myself from doing what I did and getting out 3 days in front of doing the recall on a presumptive positive on an open container of peanut butter? Would there have been another business owner like me that perhaps may have said, you know what, let's just wait for the FDA to do it. They'll get their results on Monday. It's their responsibility. And will everybody do that? Versus, now I don't think I would. I still would have done it. But I'm wondering, and I just want to ask this to you all, would that prevent anybody from doing an earlier recall?
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. And I appreciate that you answered that it would not have affected your decision to do it because that is what? The responsible thing to do.
Right.
So I appreciate you bringing up that point because it may mean that we have to do additional action to make sure that those who failed to do it just because the FDA has that authority, you know, maybe there's some more punishment that needs to be put in place. Would you agree with that?
Correct,
some more punishment for the failure to do that. I often hear in this committee and in related hearings that one of the reasons that people are concerned about requiring test results to be reported to the FDA, first of all, do you all agree that positive test results should have to be reported mandatorily to the FDA? Mr. Keenan?
It sounds like that would be a very good idea, depending on the specifics.
Okay, Mr. Mackay?
So I'd agree, positive finished food testing should be reported to the FDA.
And it should be mandatory that it is done. It's not just should be as in a voluntary nature, but it should be mandatory that they have to report positive results, correct?
Yes, however it's done, I believe that finished food testing positive should be reported to the FDA. And it is also true today that it is a law that if it's in commerce, you have to report it in any event. But I do support that.
Well, I disagree with the assessment of what the status of the law is today, and based on some other testimony here. And Ms. Isley, do you also agree that positive results need to be reported to the FDA, and that we need to mandate that that is done?
We absolutely agree with that. Our desire is that somehow that gets communicated so that small businesses like ours can make decisions based on those tests, can have the information that they need to make the decisions what vendors they buy from.
Okay. And the reason why I even bring up that subject, it's actually related to my first point with Mr. Keenan, is that I often hear from people in these hearings that we can't require the reporting of testing to the FDA because for fear that people then won't test. And I guess my response to that, sort of similar to the whole mandatory recall authority, is then we need to take further action to make sure that they are required to test and provide some sort of accountability for their failure to do so. So, you know, this is a big conundrum. And Mr. Mackay, if I could just shift a little bit over to you, because I'm struck by some of the testimony that you have given here. You talked about that high-risk foods, it's your belief that the FDA should do an annual audit. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And you also testified that sometimes you do your own independent audit at Kellogg, and sometimes you do not, because you have so many products. And is that correct? Was that your testimony?
Within the context of our own facilities, we do environmental tests, and we have a food safety plan across all of them. I was referring to when we talk about ingredients or suppliers,
right.
Given that there are 3,000 of those. We have relied on industry practice of third parties in a multi-step process.
Okay, but I'm just asking you the question then. So you said that sometimes you do a third-party independent audit. Sometimes, though, you send out someone from Kellogg, correct, to
That's
do the
correct,
audit?
yes.
Okay. And you think that the FDA should be responsible for doing the high-risk audits, but why don't you think that it would be a good practice for Kellogg, because peanuts obviously high-risk product,
Yep.
for Kellogg to also make that their standard, that if you're dealing with a high-risk ingredient, that you wouldn't do your own audit?
Yeah, Congresswoman, it's really a practicality difference. For example, we have undertaken audits of all of the peanut and peanut paste suppliers going forward, and so have almost every other company that uses peanut-based products. The implication has been that those companies are running so many audits for companies, they actually can't produce the product we all want. So if we could get great standards, if we could have an FDA system where on high-risk plants they're actually doing an inspection that we can all rely on, it would be better for everyone, because then they can actually, these audits, the comprehensive ones, can take a fair amount of time, and rather than duplicate those by hundreds or thousands of companies, if there's a set standard and an FDA audit of high-risk facilities, we should, I believe, be able to rely on that.
Okay, I would also just like to talk a little bit about that third-party audit. And you made a reference to the entity that conducted that third-party audit. And is that an entity that you use a lot?
If you're referring to AIB,
yes.
I think AIB and third-party audits in general are broad across the industry. I think AIB is probably the largest auditor in the US.
My question is, do you use them a lot?
I can't tell you exactly how many audits we use from them, but we would use them on a number of our raw material supplies, yes.
Would you please provide that information to me after the hearing when you
Sure,
get
I'm sure we can
further
get that,
information?
yeah.
Okay. And in light of all of the things that have happened, are you still relying on AIB audits after all of the information that's been presented here today and in the past few months that has come out? Are you still relying on AIB audits?
You know, if you look at the AIB audit, they actually did find the problems. The issue wasn't with the AIB audit, it was with the fact that PCA actually acted in a dishonest and unethical way. The audit by AIB identified the problems and PCA did not act upon them.
Well, Mr. Mackay, I would suggest that some of the evidence or the information that's been presented here today creates great concern about the coziness of these third-party so-called independent audits and the results. And so part of my question again was just whether or not you continue to rely on the audits by AIB.
Well, subsequent to this unfortunate event, we have undertaken with high-risk suppliers to conduct our own audits.
Thank you. Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Braley for questions, please.
Mr. Chairman, I want to focus on the costs of inadequate food safety inspections. And I'll start with you, Mr. Mackay. There are press reports that the peanut industry could lose as much as $1 billion as a result of this Salmonella outbreak. And that's a lot of money, but what strikes me is how little money it would have taken to prevent all this from happening. We know that the inspections didn't work when they were conducted by AIB, the third-party auditor that PCA hired. And when committee staff interviewed AIB officials, they told us that those audits were standard good manufacturing practices audits, which are the firm's most basic audits that cost about $1,000. But AIB also told the committee staff that they offer more rigorous audits, which they call the gold standard audit, that is much more intensive and costs in the range of $20,000 to $30,000. So, Mr. Kanan, let me start with you. Did your firm ever consider acquiring a gold standard audit from AIB?
We every year have done our AIB with the good manufacturing practices one, and we have not, nor did I actually know about this gold standard $20,000 audit.
Mr. Mackay, has Kellogg ever used a gold standard audit from AIB?
I can't I don't know whether we have. I can tell you that within the context of our own facilities, we are doing what you'd term gold standard audits.
Ms. Isley, has your firm ever used a gold standard audit from AIB?
Mr. Bailey, I appreciate the question. We are a very small retail business.
Can you just answer the question, please? I don't have much time.
No, we did not.
All right. Another option that was available to all of you, and I think you alluded to this, Mr. Mackay, is paying your own audit staff to conduct an audit. And earlier in the hearing, we learned that another company, Nestle USA, did its own audit of PCA rather than using a third-party auditor hired by PCA. Nestle's audits uncovered serious deficiencies such as rodent infestation and inadequate pathogen monitoring, and as a result, they refused to do business with PCA. Do any of you know how much Nestle paid to conduct its own audit of PCA?
No.
Just answer yes or no.
No, but I would reflect that that audit was done in 2002, and audits by default are at a point-in-time inspections.
Well, we all know that things go up over time because of inflation, but we're talking about $1 billion impact on one segment of the food industry. And the numbers we're talking about in the $1,000 range seem fairly small by comparison. Well, we asked Nestle, and here's what they said. They told us that they pay cost to their audits that they conduct, and counting the employees' salaries, travel expenses, and other costs, they estimated that their audits of PCA cost $1,800, which seems like nothing compared to the alternative. And both of those audits took 1 day to conduct. Mr. Mackay, can you tell us, based on current figures, how much Kellogg calculates that this problem has cost it?
Currently, our estimation is between $65 and $70 million.
Mr. Cannon, do you have any estimate of what this has cost your company?
It's around $500,000.
Ms. Isley?
We do not have an estimate.
So for approximately $1,800, each of your businesses might have discovered the disastrous conditions at PCA and avoided the millions of dollars in recall costs and lost sales that you were incurring today, which seems like a very small investment in food safety up front and part of smart business practices. So let me ask you this, Mr. Mackay, does your company have plans to change its auditing practices going forward?
We've already changed as a learning from this with high-risk ingredients. We're now conducting our own audits.
Mr. Cannon, what about your company?
Yes, we've already changed as well. We want to do more audits, and we want, because of this situation that happened with our high-risk suppliers, which we have determined.
Ms. Isley?
Yes, we have plans in place to change. Once again, we are a small retail chain where you say $1,800 is a small amount of money, and it is not for a business of our size.
Well, you also realize that one of the costs...
I agree that one of the primary issues for us is to ensure the health and safety of the people who buy food from us, and that is our primary concern. But I also want to give input into the committee that is realistic when you're talking about small chain retailers and what they can and cannot do, because it would be a disservice to the committee to say that we will go to the point where we would be out of business in order to inspect the 1,300 vendors.
Well, let's talk about that. Your company has $200 million in gross revenues, operates 30 stores in 3 states, and employs approximately 1,000 people. Do you think it's worthwhile to risk the employment of those 1,000 employees by failing to take adequate safeguards up front and having the long-term costs risk bankruptcy for the company?
No, we do not, but at the same time, if we...
Well, I want to reclaim my time because I don't have any time left. I want to just close, Mr. Chairman, by pointing out that one of the reasons that I founded the Populist Caucus was to emphasize consumer protection and corporate responsibility, and I think it's important at this hearing to acknowledge that we need to reward companies like Nestle USA who do the right thing and set best corporate practices. They operate a facility in my district in Waverly, Iowa, and I would like the record to reflect that they are a good example of what you do when you do things right. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Braley. Ms. Schakowsky for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to acknowledge that I think we're at the base of this problem. We're talking about a company that, as far as I'm concerned, was headed by a murderer. Somebody who knew that there was a problem and quite deliberately made a decision to send that product out. I don't know, Mr. McKay, if you've been here before. I know the other two for sure haven't, but we have. We've been here before with food that has, if not killed, definitely made a lot of people ill. Spinach and peppers, and we've every so often we're here again. And so I just want to acknowledge the responsibility that I feel as a member of Congress and our responsibility to act. But I also do want to take you up on what I've heard of your offer, and I'm not, none of us is absolved of, some responsibility, and certainly going forward we have to be. And I did want to, because we had a private conversation, Mr. Keenan, and I do want you to tell me about that conversation with Mr. Parnell at PCA.
It was. I just wanted to clarify that. And Mr. Stupak, you had in your opening statement that I had said in my opening statement that I personally talked to Mr. Parnell, and I had asked him, when we're hearing rumors of Salmonella, when the Minnesota Department of Agriculture called me, we're hearing rumors. They're testing it, and I want to know from you, have you had any other problems with Salmonella? Have you had any other complaints? Have you had any problems in the past? And he personally told me on the phone, no. The email you showed is actually 4 or 5 hours after that. That's when we started talking to him. And we said, that's when you hear about, well, we're going to have to do the recall. And that's when he said, I think I'm going to go to church and pray. So we were very up on top of this with him. But when you have someone that's going to act illegal and criminal, I still am just so surprised and I don't know, bewildered on how to handle somebody like that in life.
Well, let me just say, that's why I think we absolutely have to have the systems in place, both at the FDA, but I want to talk to you about systems as well. Do you think that as part of your own company's reporting to you, that you ask for any positive test results from your suppliers? Let me just ask each of you if that is a feasible thing to do going forward, Mr. Keenan.
Yes, that's feasible to do.
And do you, well, let me just get that, Mr. Mackay.
Certainly anyone who provides us with raw materials, they would normally, if they're being honest and ethical, give us a response via the third-party lab of a positive.
Do you request that? Is that routine? And do you plan to do that? We request
that as part of the certificate of analysis, yes.
You do?
Yes, it would be feasible to request it without the weight of law behind it. It can, in a company that is bent on malfeasance, those can be not given, or that they can also be fabricated.
If they're not given, would you not feel that maybe this is not a company to do business with?
I think what I was referring to is I believe the question you asked is, should they be sending you if there were positive?
Should you, actually, I'm asking, should you be asking for that?
Yeah.
Yes, we can ask. We did ask for their test results from the Plainview, Texas plant, and yes, we do request that. My point was that our requesting it does not mean that they will necessarily provide us with the information if they have it, because there's no weight of law behind it. And additionally, if a company is bent on malfeasance, that they can fabricate the test result and show you a negative result.
If I may, I don't mean to interrupt here, but
sorry,
Ms. Isley, you're under oath, and you testified earlier. You never even asked for certificate of analysis. So how can you say you asked those questions at Ms. Shahowski?
Mr. Chairman, we asked it after, when we were talking to the Plainview, Texas plant.
After the recall?
After the recall, yes, sir.
Not before.
No.
He was asking about before.
I was.
I
That it be part of your routine inquiry as business owners to ask for the test results in a certificate of analysis.
And can I just be clear, because we get that on the certificate of analysis. We have not, I don't believe, currently requested if a supplier we're dealing with had any positives that they inform us of those, even whether they're for us or someone else. And I think earlier there was a question, should that be mandated to be given to the FDA, and I would support that.
No, I'm not talking about the FDA now.
No, I'm with you. I just think I may have not answered the question appropriately.
So well, let me understand then. You did ask for that information, or you did not?
We ask for the information on anything that's sent to us. I don't believe we've asked for it more broadly to say if any supplier that we deal with had a positive for anyone else, I would have to check that information. So in other words, anything we get that's coming to a Kellogg facility, we have a certificate of analysis and we get that information. Now in the case of PCA, it appears that they may have manipulated that information, but I would have to check whether or not we asked for it if it's for someone else and just happens to be a positive.
Did you ask for PCA to disclose positive results before the outbreak? Had you ever asked them previous positives?
As part of the independent third-party audit and the risk analysis that we go through with the supplier,
yes,
that's all part of the questioning. And typically the third-party auditor will actually do that sort of evaluation. And in fact, I think AIB did identify some issues, and I think the issue really at the end of the day was PCA did not take the corrective actions.
And you didn't make sure that they did?
I believe we did everything we could, but you know, I may be getting into an area where I don't have actually the clarity of data here.
Okay. I know I'm over time. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
Mr. Sullivan for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the panel for being here. And this question is for Mr. Cannon and Mr. Mackay, and I guess all panelists. Have you heard of the Global Food Safety Initiative and the audits required to be GFSI certified? GSFI audits do analyze HACCP plans in greater depth, require a greater length of time to complete, are more expansive, and give a more accurate evaluation of a company's food safety controls. Would you be willing to, 1, be subject to a GFSI audit, and 2, require them for suppliers of high-risk ingredients? I guess we'll just go.
Congressman Sullivan, I've heard of it. I don't know the details much about it. I would most willingly want to look at it and be a part of it, and as long as it's something that would be feasible for us, we absolutely would be a part of it. And if it was something feasible for our suppliers, we absolutely would like to be able to request that of our suppliers as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Congressman, absolutely. It started in 2000, and we have been using that in all of our plants and manufacturing facilities for about 3 years. As you look at it, there are 3 reasons why we think GFSI is a great standard, and whether we adopt that for the US food safety system or something equivalent, we think it's a great benchmark. The standards are accredited, the audit firms are accredited, the auditors are certified, and it's just a much more rigorous process. And I think there is a lot of discussion now with industry, even talking about how we take GFSI and potentially use it in areas like APEC. So I think that would be an excellent place for this committee to look, because it actually does address many of the recommendations I said, and they're already in place and formalized.
Thank you.
We are unfamiliar with the document that you are referring to. We'd be happy to take a look at it. As a retailer and not a manufacturer, I'm not sure if we would have the expertise to understand exactly all the requirements in it.
Okay. All right, I got one more. The food production chain is very complicated, and there are many players, including suppliers, processors, distributors, and retailers. Should they have different responsibilities and controls for ensuring food safety?
Yes, I believe they all should have different responsibilities and different levels of it, but my personal belief is it should start with the manufacturer, the one who is actually making the product, sealing it, boxing it, casing it. That's where I think the emphasis needs to be, is on that portion of it. I think there are things distributors can do and retailers can do in the supply chain to help, but the greatest emphasis has got to come on with the manufacturer of the product.
I think the standards for manufacturers and suppliers should be uniform and consistent, and that's the only way we're going to ensure the safety of the food supply. When you talk to retailers and distributors, I think that's a different situation there. I think the focus from their perspective is more on traceability and how quickly they can react if there is a problem in the food system. But I think with the standards, good manufacturing practices, HACCP, etc., that really comes back to suppliers and manufacturers.
We would agree with all the statements that have been made.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I yield back.
We'll go second round for those members who are here, because a couple questions I want to follow up on. Mr. Cannon, you mentioned the email that I did in my opening statement, and when Mr. Pennell wrote back, says I'm sure it's something we did, haven't heard anything yet, but we'll let you know. Did they ever get back with you?
Well, after that, that's when we said we're doing the recall, and then we had to talk to them the next day and over the weekend, and it was a constant.
Right, and I realize you're the first company to start the
Right.
recall on the peanut butter, but did you notify the FDA then when you got this email?
Oh, well, the FDA had already been a part of this whole process for the day. I can't remember the day of that email, if that's the Friday. Or
January 7th, Wednesday, January 7th.
That's the Wednesday, yeah. That was upon the 1st. So,
Right, but did you ever give them the email?
I don't know if we did or not, to be honest with you, sir.
Okay. You said you do independent testing now for food safety? You do testing now of your peanut butter and that?
Oh, yes. We are doing, for the new peanut butter suppliers, we're requiring a whole new set of standards for that as well.
Okay, but do you do testing over and above what your new suppliers give you?
If we have, I don't know, I do not know if we have tested the peanut butter for Salmonella again or not. But
So you could be basically in the same position you're in right now.
Well, no.
Hopefully not 2 years from now like we have been. But why wouldn't you? If you're not doing independent testing, why wouldn't you just end up in the same situation if you're relying on third parties?
Well, no. I mean, we are. I want to make sure I'm answering you correctly.
Sure.
So you have to just bear with me just for a moment.
A little bit. I can't give you a lot of time because we're 5 minutes.
We are doing our own testing, and we're doing we're reevaluating the suppliers. We're looking at their AIB audits closely.
You're doing your own testing, so you deal with peanut butter. The problem is Salmonella. Do you test independently from your supplier for Salmonella?
I don't know if we have yet or not.
Okay. So technically, we could be back to where we were 2 years from now. Hopefully not, but we could be underneath this scenario. If your company comes across, on your independent testing, if you come across with a positive for Salmonella, you've indicated PCA should have notified the FDA. How about your company? Should you then be responsible for notifying the FDA?
Absolutely, and we absolutely would.
How about you, Mr. Mackay? You do independent testing now. If you found positive tests for Salmonella or E. coli on spinach, whatever it might be, do you think the company has a responsibility to notify the FDA?
Yes, I believe so. We have started as a learning from this on all high-risk ingredients, doing our own multitask audits. But yes, I would agree that if you find in the finished food a positive test, the FDA should be notified.
How about you, Ms. Isley?
I beg your pardon?
That's Ms. Isley, same question.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, we have started our own testing on the roasted peanuts, and we believe that if there was a positive test, you should notify the FDA.
Okay. In this PCA thing, it's my understanding and reading your testimony that none of you hired PCA, or I'm sorry, you hired PCA, but you didn't hire AIB. Is that correct, Mr. Cannon? You didn't hire.
Well, we hire AIB for our own facilities.
Okay. So how about for Georgia?
as far as requiring our supplier to have somebody,
Right.
I mean, we ask for their third-party audits.
So you don't
Not
say
a-
use AIB or use...
No, we don't specify currently who to use.
Okay, Mr. Kai, how about you?
I think there are 3 or 4 auditors that we would be comfortable with companies and suppliers using, and AIB was one of them, and probably the most
And
widely-
PCA picked them then?
PCA picked them, yes. They worked for PCA, they did not work for us.
Okay. Are you still comfortable using AIB?
You know, I think as we've looked at AIB, they actually identified the problems. The issue here is an unethical and dishonest company that actually ignored many of the findings that AIB highlighted to them.
Sure. But also here, my understanding from listening to your testimony was there were different things, like you asked AIB to do a GMP, good manufacturing practices, but you could ask them to dig deeper, as I think Mr. Braley and others pointed out. It would have cost more money, right? It would have cost a higher test, like $20,000 to do a salmonella testing as opposed to just good manufacturing practices, correct?
Yeah. Well, one of the learnings, I think, from this, from our perspective, is that with high-risk ingredients, then we are now doing our own internal and more significant tests, which are more consistent with GFSI.
But before the salmonella outbreak, you could have asked PCA or AIB to do a more extensive testing for salmonella.
We could have, and I think, you know, I'd say that what we thought at the time, we were using industry best practice. We have a multi-step process, including the third-party audit and the C of A and a risk analysis.
Sure, but Georgia plants,
Yeah.
in 2007, ConAgra, was it Peter Pan or Skippy Peanut Bar, whatever it was.
Right.
We had the same thing 2 years earlier. Wouldn't that put you on an alert to ask for a more robust testing, not just of what's going on the line, but actually to test results and do testing for salmonella? I mean, this is all in the same spot. Basically, 18 months later, we have the same thing.
Yeah, it was our understanding through the AIB audit that they were doing environmental testing. And when you look at ConAgra, environmental testing was really the key there, because the issue was that leak in the roof.
Testing is different than food safety testing, is it not?
They're a combination. Environmental testing is something you do at the start of the process to try and mitigate against anything actually making it into the food.
Food, sure.
And the final check is you have a certificate of analysis on the final food to make sure there is no pathogen in the food before it's shipped to us. So it's a combination of both of those things that, if they had been followed appropriately, we believe would have potentially mitigated against this.
I guess the part that bothers me, Kellogg's, you're a big corporation. Many products that unfortunately cost you a lot of money because of this recall. But yet you put PCA in the driver's seat. You tell them, oh, use any one of these people. We rely on you. You don't do independent testing. But without you, there is no PCA. I mean, you're the guy you're the company that is the monetary giant here. You could control these suppliers better if you wanted to, because if you're not buying their product, it's going to be harder for them to stay in business. I would think that a large corporation like yourself, you're all big corporations actually, you would have more, you could use your financial leverage to make sure some of these things we see now in hindsight could have been done to prevent the salmonella, especially since we had peanut butter salmonella not even 2 years earlier.
Yeah,
I'm baffled by that.
I think with hindsight, you're right, and we have changed our process, and we are doing our own testing. I mentioned earlier a potential practicality issue here. When you look at the size of this supplier in the context of Kellogg, we bought, I think, $5 to $10 million annually of product from this company. We probably spend in excess of, I think, $3 or $4 billion on raw materials. So it was a very small supplier, and the industry best practice is to use third-party audits. We did supplement that with a risk analysis, and we did mandate certificates of analysis. And unfortunately, a company that is not honest and ethical can mitigate against even the best systems.
Yeah, but a question whether it's industry standard, when Nestle goes through and finds the problems, even Mrs. Fields cookies, we have documents in our binder there that they found it, and others, even smaller company, went to PCA and just said, man, these are bad practices, we're not going to use them. So I hope that's not the industry standards.
I'm not trying to be defensive.
Yeah, no,
there are hundreds of companies involved here, so all of us, if you like, are partially at fault for potentially relying on a system that I'm hoping that Congress will work with industry to actually enhance and improve, because that's the way we're going to actually make our food system stronger.
Well, President Obama has put more money or proposed more money for the Food and Drug Administration, about $1 billion more, about $200 million new money for food safety. But everyone tells us it's still not enough. They say they need at least $350 million per year for the next 3 years, plus about an 18% increase every year after that for another 5 years to get up to par for food and drug safety. And that's why we have the Global Food Safety Bill that Mr. Dingell, Mr. Plow, and myself have written. Would you be in favor then of those registration fees? Not only do you have to register a plant like PCA, whether you're in Plainview, Texas, or in Georgia, but a registration fee and be put on these companies so we can finance this rigorous inspection system we're all hoping for and wishing for, so we stop the foodborne illnesses?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is Kellogg, food safety is paramount to Kellogg, and I think to all, reputable food companies. And I think the industry would embrace how do we play an active role in ensuring that we can help in whatever the funding dynamics are to ensure that we do enhance the food safety system. I don't know exactly what that might mean, but I know that the industry would, and Kellogg would certainly be prepared to step up to
including registration or inspection fees?
Whatever the final determination might be, whatever makes most sense.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Mr. Walden for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McKay, let me go to you. How many suppliers does Kellogg's have?
We have about, I think, 3,000 ingredients, about 1,000 suppliers.
1,000 suppliers, 3,000 ingredients. And you require inspections, audits from all of those suppliers?
Yes, we have a multi-step process that we use in actually accrediting every supplier, including a third-party audit, including an analysis of risk, including certificates of analysis.
And have you worked with AIB? They're one of them, I think you said, that is one of the gold standards, right?
Well, they are one of 3 or 4, as I understand it, accredited auditing firms in the U.S. that we have on our list as being acceptable to use by suppliers to do the independent third-party audits.
All right. Chairman Waxman stated that Kellogg's relied on procedures that are normally okay and did not in this instance take extra steps that he felt was necessary to catch or personally inspect PCA. Is it practical or cost-effective to take these extra steps? I think that's one of the things I'm struggling is where in the food chain, literally, is it most effective to step in? And I'm trying to figure. I've got a little company. I got a number of them in my district and state that have been affected. They're food producers. They've had to do the recalls. I think of the one out in Union, Oregon, Rock Creek nut that, used some nuts and put it both in trail mix and in chocolate clusters. I cannot imagine a company in that tiny little town having the resources to go order inspections of PCA. How do we get to the point where if you're the one producing the next step in the product development, that you can count on what you get to be safe?
Yeah, I think I'd refer, as I'm looking at the 9 recommendations we made, and each one of them actually builds on the other, so it's not like you can draw on one. But I think if I pointed to the development of food safety plans for every food facility as being mandatory, developing consistent manufacturer audit standards as being another, actually having the FDA inspect what they would determine through the council as high-risk foods and or ingredients, mandating that when they do those annual inspections, that if there are any test results within that facility, they're turned over to the FDA. I'm talking environmental now, more than finished food. I think in combination, all of those things, plus mandatory recall and traceability, are going to be required to actually improve the food safety system in the U.S.
Because I'm a little sympathetic toward Ms. Isley here, because as a retailer, I think it'd be almost impossible. It's bad enough, it's hard enough running your retail outlet, then to think that every product you get in, you have to test or something like that, somewhere upstream of that,
Yes.
she should be able to know that when it comes to her store from your company or your company, that it's safe. Otherwise, you go next, to the parents, that you have to test it before you eat it. I mean, at some point here, it gets ridiculous.
You know, Congressman, I agree, and that's why I think we need a comprehensive overhaul of the current system. And I think the steps we've put forward, and I know a number of these have already been in what Congress is trying to pass, I think will make a significant difference in food safety in the U.S.
So what stage in the production process would you say is most important? Which one has the greatest likelihood of detecting a problem? I mean, if we had to focus on, here are the top 2 places you need to go, what's the order?
Well, I think you've got to break it down. The first one is, if we're buying ingredients, then you need a comprehensive system that ensures that those ingredients, when they come into our plant, are actually safe. Now, typically the last step on that is a certificate of analysis. In this case, we had...
Yeah, you had one that
we had those, but, you know, it's very hard to manage for an unethical company.
Right.
Once we have the raw material and assuming that it is safe, then within the manufacturing process, environmental testing at the very beginning of that and all the way through food safety plans, whether it's HACCP or an equivalent, is absolutely essential, because if you detect something early on, you can avoid it getting into the finished food. That's absolutely critical. That's why companies do, and GFSI, these audits are so important. But once you have the plant running, checking for environmental is really critical to make sure you can rectify any issues that might happen.
And I have a question for both you and Mr. Keenan. You tested your products that you got from PCA, the ingredients which came from PCA, at some point after this was known, right?
We relied on third-party audit. Oh, on the recall products? Yeah. I think the FDA has done all sorts of tests. In the facility where the sandwich crackers were made, Carrie, for example, we did in the last year over 300 plus independent environmental tests, all negative. The FDA has come and done a massive amount of tests, all negative.
All right, and Mr. Koenig.
All the testing we did, Congressman Walden, on that turned up negative. But the interesting thing I'd like to talk about real quick is that when that open container was tested, they took 13 scoops of peanut butter and tested each one differently, and only 4 of the 13 turned up positive. All of the products that we tested were negative. I never heard what FDA found out about.
Did you ask?
Yes, but they just haven't
they won't
gotten
reveal
back.
it, or what?
They just haven't gotten back with us.
Why?
I don't know.
You don't know the answer to that. Well, and the other question that I wanted to get to, and then I'll let you finish up, because I'll forget it otherwise. You said in your testimony that when you first got wind that there was a problem, right, that you asked FDA to test the product. Yes. And they didn't. Why? Did they tell you?
I was baffled at that on the first day. I don't know what their procedures or policies are. I was asking them, please take it and test it, because I want to know. Sure. If not, I'm going to do it anyway. So.
Did they say that's your responsibility, not ours?
No, they
just kind of an answer.
They didn't have an answer.
But then they came back once.
They came back the next day, and then maybe they weren't instructed by their superiors at that point, or I don't know. It didn't make sense to me, but I wasn't going to, be questioning them at that point.
Mr. Chairman, it'd be a good follow-up, I think, for some time with the FDA as to why they didn't do that. I mean, I would think if you're a distributor or a producer and you think you've got a problem,
yeah,
you ask the FDA to say.
Being that we were the distributor, we obviously had the product right there, so it was.
But then the next day, didn't they come back and take?
The next day they came
back. But only after.
Right.
Only after they discovered it in another container, right, or something like that.
I don't know why they didn't take it the first day versus the second day.
Yeah. Did the second day, but not the first day. I know it was in your testimony.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
I don't know.
But then
did you ever find out the results of those?
No,
he never did.
That's the other issue. He hasn't been able to get the results back from the FDA, which seems
odd.
But it's going to be interesting because most of that was negative, and I think that's the thing about Salmonella and finding that peanut butter. It lives in pockets.
Yeah.
And
that's what we've learned. And that's why I think so many of us were so offended when PCA got a positive. Then they sent another sample out, got a negative, and then said, cut them loose
Right.
about
See,
the lots.
somebody earlier had said that PCA was ignorant. I think
No,
that they
no.
were very smart, and they knew exactly what they were doing to try and get around the system. They knew that they could probably reblend that peanut butter and retest it, because look, 4 out of the 13
Right.
only came back. The odds are you're going to get a negative.
Yeah, that's one of the great things of this committee. You learn a lot about things you never thought you would learn about, and that's one of them, is that it is almost random in peanut butter whether you get a positive or negative sample. But that's why the law says you get a positive sample, you're done.
Right.
Now, you can go sample again and try and figure out what went wrong and where it's in the system, but you do not ship that. And we had the email that indicated they, at least from my reading of it, knew pretty clearly what they were doing and shipped out peanut butter once they got a negative after they got a positive, and that's
So
absolutely
to Mr. Mackay's point, how do you stop somebody from being crooked?
And I guess that's, and then I'll quit here because I've gone over my time, but that's what I'm struggling with, is I don't want us to overreact and regulate to the point where you can't produce food, and then what do? Just have it all imported and we'll have no idea what's in it. We know about that from our other hearings. And so I want to get a balance here that works, that gives us as much security as we can in our food chain, but doesn't blow up our whole system, because it's been working pretty well, frankly. I realize there are these issues we've dealt with, and that's where we're trying to, I think we ought to hone in, be careful. Your recommendations, Mr. Mackay, are most helpful, and all of your input has been most helpful for me. As we've got a separate bill that's bipartisan that would address this, I think, in a constructive way, too, and hopefully we can get together on a common strategy here. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses.
Well, thanks. I guess one thing, how do you get to it? I think there's a responsibility of food processors to ask the question. It's my understanding from the testimony we've gone through here for the last 3-4 hours is no one asked the question. Did you ever have a positive? No one asked the question of PCA. In fact, Mr. Mackay, that one document you showed us, certificate of analysis, where it says no salmonella. In fact, that lot did have a positive salmonella. I mean, I'm not saying question every COA, but I would think someone would ask the question. And the reason why you're here, and I don't want to confuse the record, like Ms. Isley and even Mr. Can, you're processors. You're not just strictly retailers. So who has the ultimate or the final responsibility?
We're the distributor with this product. That's why I kept saying it's got to be the manufacturer.
Well, you get the peanut butter from PCA. It goes to your plant. You slap your name. And
no, we don't. We didn't touch it. They put the label on. They sealed the case.
Okay.
We just bring it in.
But it has your name on it. Don't you have some responsibility to make sure it's...
I didn't say that we didn't have any, but in this case, we are the distributor, and I really think the biggest point should come with the manufacturer. We've got to help the manufacturers make better products. So retailers like Ms. Isley and distributors like myself and the thousands of other...
But Ms. Isley still processes the peanut. I mean, the only problem you had was in the peanut butter that you grind in your stores, right? Right, wasn't it?
Well, I'm referring to her as a retailer in general. The retailers and the distributors in general, the biggest responsibility has got to come with the manufacturer.
Really?
It starts there and ends there. It's sealed and closed.
But don't you have some responsibility since you put your name on it? And
sure.
You're the one who really puts it in the...
I'm not saying that we don't have that
commerce.
responsibility, but yes, but absolutely. But to help fix the system, Congressman, to help fix it, we've got to focus mainly on the manufacturer.
Okay, let me ask this question. Mr. Mackay, if I may. Has Kellogg ever told suppliers they do not need to do finished product testing and instead just need to do environmental testing at facilities? Have you told your suppliers you don't have to do the finished product testing, just do your environmental testing?
I don't believe so, but I would think not. We can get you an absolute answer because I don't want to put it on record and find that I'm wrong, but my belief would be that that would not be the case.
Okay. Okay. Either we read it or we saw it in some document and we're just trying to recall it. We've gone through the thousands of documents. We thought some directive in there or a comment made that you would just, don't worry about the final product, just do the environmental testing.
You know, I don't believe so, but we can check. I would say, though, that if you have exhaustive environmental testing and you have a food safety plan in place and you're following good manufacturing processes, that the probability of you having a problem in the final food is mitigated significantly, but I would have to check that, Congressman, but I don't believe that would be the case.
Sure, if you'd give us back
sure.
a possibility with that, would like to see that, because it bothers us if that was a situation, because I think we all got responsibility through the whole chain, from the grower all the way down to the person who puts it on the shelves, to make sure that our food is safe.
Yes, and just to add to your comment, I think to your question is, I think everyone has a responsibility in the chain, and I think the more comprehensive that we can make the food safety system in the US through supplier, through manufacturer principally, the more likely we are to really improve the food safety in the US, which I believe is already very good, but clearly can be improved.
Well, from where we sit, this is what, our 15th hearing in about 18 months or so, just on food safety alone. That's not even counting the drug hearings we've had on drug safety. And I guess we're just bothered by no standards, and everyone's doing something a little different. We have 3 witnesses here who are all trying to do the right thing. They got 3 different sort of systems going, so we got to make sure we have some uniformity so we know what to look for. And these audits, like on tab 23 there, where Sam Leitsky gets notice in December there's going to be an audit. It will take place on March 23rd, 24th. I got time to clean up the dead rodents. I got time to clean up the flies, the beetles, the rodent droppings, the feathers, whatever it may be. And that sort of must come to an end. So I guess we're looking for it. I know you all gave us suggestions on what to do. We appreciate it. We do appreciate you all trying to help out in this matter, and for your testimony today. And I want to thank you for being here, and thanks for putting up with our questions and answering the questions under oath the best of your ability. And we look forward to some further answers. All members will have 10 days to submit additional questions for the record, so don't be surprised if we contact you and ask for some additional information. And with that, that concludes our hearing. I want to thank once again all of our witnesses and members for their active participation today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.